An arrogant millionaire observes an abandoned, sick, homeless woman trying to teach his wheelchair-bound son to walk. Desperate, he runs toward the girl, but as he approaches, he notices something so terrifying and shocking that it leaves him completely paralyzed. The secret he discovers changes his life forever. Before continuing, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel. Your help is very important. Richard Mitchell couldn't believe what his eyes were seeing on that cold autumn morning in Connecticut. He had decided to take a walk through the extensive gardens of his mansion, something he rarely did since the accident, when he spotted, through the hedge that marked his property, his son Ethan out of his wheelchair, trying to support himself against a tree. By his side, a frail girl with worn clothes and a sickly appearance was encouraging him with words Richard couldn't hear from where he stood. "Ethan!" he shouted, running toward the children. Panic seized his chest. His son shouldn't be out of his chair, much less with a stranger on his property. The girl, who appeared no more than 9 years old, turned around startled. Her large eyes, a deep blue, contrasted with the dirt on her thin, pale face. That was when Richard noticed the necklace hanging from the child's neck, a delicate silver angel with small, open wings. His heart stopped for a moment. He knew that necklace. It had been the last gift he had given to Elizabeth before the accident. "Dad, I can explain," shouted Ethan, losing his balance and falling onto the damp grass. His face, normally sad and apathetic, now showed genuine fear. Richard stood paralyzed, unable to process the scene before him. Elizabeth's necklace around the neck of this homeless girl, his son trying to stand, the strange feeling that something deeply significant was happening. "Who are you? And how did you get this?" he asked the girl, pointing to the necklace as he approached with calculated steps. His voice, normally controlled and confident in business meetings, now trembled slightly. "My name is Lily," she said softly, her fingers instinctively grasping the silver angel. "My mom gave me this before she went to heaven. She said an angel gave it to her." Richard felt his legs weaken. He knelt down beside Ethan, who was now sitting on the grass, looking more alive than he had in months. "Dad, Lily has been helping me," Ethan said, with a glimmer in his eyes that Richard hadn't seen since before the accident. "She knows exercises that can make my legs work again. She says her mom was a nurse and taught her." Richard looked at the girl again, examining her more carefully. Despite her dirty clothes and unkempt appearance, there was something dignified about her, something familiar that he couldn't quite place. "Where do you live, Lily? Where are your parents?" Richard asked, his business instincts taking over, cataloging information, assessing risks. The girl looked down, her small fingers still playing with the necklace. "I live over there," she pointed vaguely toward the wooded area behind the property. "My mom is gone now, but I'm okay. I come here to help Ethan, because he reminds me of someone I used to know." Richard felt a knot forming in his throat. The coincidences were too many. The necklace, this homeless child with knowledge of therapeutic exercises, the immediate connection with his son, who had barely spoken to anyone since the accident. "How long have you been coming here?" he asked, looking from Lily to Ethan. 3 weeks, Ethan answered with a hint of defiance. "Martha brings me outside to get fresh air, and after she goes back inside to prepare lunch, Lily comes through that hole in the hedge." He pointed to a small gap in the otherwise perfectly maintained greenery. Richard looked at the angel necklace again, feeling as though Elizabeth herself had somehow orchestrated this encounter. He suddenly realized that for the first time in over a year, he was truly present with his son, not just physically in the same space, but emotionally connected to what was happening in Ethan's life. "Dad, please don't make her go away," Ethan pleaded, his voice breaking. "She's teaching me to be strong again like Mom would want." Richard Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Financial Group, the man known on Wall Street as the Iceman for his cold, calculated decisions, felt something crack inside his chest. A dam of emotions he had built since the day he lost Elizabeth began to leak. "Lily," he said, his voice softer now, Would you like to come inside for some lunch? The girl's eyes widened with surprise, but before she could answer, a violent coughing fit overtook her small body. Richard instinctively reached out to steady her and was shocked by the heat radiating from her skin. "You're burning up," he said, concern replacing his earlier suspicion. Without thinking twice, he picked her up, surprised by how little she weighed. "Ethan, let me get you back in your chair, and then we're taking Lily to see a doctor." As Richard carried the feverish girl toward the house, with Ethan following in his wheelchair that Martha had hurriedly brought out, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't coincidence. The angel necklace glinted in the autumn sunlight, a silent witness to a connection he couldn't yet understand, but somehow knew would change everything. The emergency room at Greenwich Hospital was quiet for a Tuesday afternoon. Richard sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair while doctors examined Lily. Ethan sat in his wheelchair beside him, uncharacteristically alert and concerned. "Dad, is Lily gonna be okay?" Ethan asked, his voice small but more engaged than Richard had heard in months. "I hope so, buddy," Richard answered, surprised by the genuine worry he felt for this strange girl who had appeared in their lives just hours ago. A doctor in a white coat approached them, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm Dr. Patel. We've examined the girl. She has pneumonia, but we've started her on antibiotics. She's also malnourished and shows signs of having lived in harsh conditions recently." "Will she recover?" Richard asked, standing up. "Yes, with proper care. But Mr. Mitchell, we need to contact Child Protective Services. She says she's been living alone since her mother died 6 months ago." Richard nodded absently, his mind racing. "Can we see her, doctor?" Patel led them to a small room where Lily lay in a hospital bed that seemed to swallow her tiny frame. The angel necklace still hung around her neck, standing out against the pale blue hospital gown. "Hey, Lily," Ethan said, wheeling himself to her bedside with newfound determination. "You're going to be okay." Lily smiled weakly. "I'm sorry I got sick. We were making such good progress with your exercises." Richard cleared his throat. "Lily, I need to ask you something important. That necklace you're wearing, can you tell me exactly how your mother got it?" Lily's small hand reached up to touch the silver angel. "Mom said that a lady gave it to her right before she went to heaven. She was in this same hospital." Her blue eyes looked around the room. "The lady was in an accident. Mom was her nurse. She made Mom promise to give the necklace to her little boy someday. But then we couldn't find him." Richard felt the room spin around him. "What was the lady's name, Lily? Do you know?" "Elizabeth," Lily whispered. "Mom said she was beautiful and kind. She said Elizabeth told her the angel would protect whoever wore it." Richard stumbled backward, gripping the edge of the hospital bed for support. Elizabeth. His Elizabeth had given her nurse the necklace in her final moments. The same nurse who was apparently Lily's mother. "What was your mother's name?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Sarah Collins," Lily answered. "She was the best mom ever. She taught me all about helping people get better. That's why I wanted to help Ethan when I saw him in his wheelchair. I thought maybe the angel wanted me to find him." The pieces were falling into place in Richard's mind. Sarah Collins. He remembered now, the compassionate nurse who had been with Elizabeth in her final hours. The one who had gently told him that his wife had passed. The woman he had barely acknowledged in his grief, focused only on the news that Ethan would likely never walk again. "Lily," Richard said, sitting on the edge of the bed, "your mother was a very special person. She was with my wife, Ethan's mum. When she died in the accident last year," Ethan's eyes widened. "The angel necklace was Mom's?" Richard nodded, tears forming in his eyes. "It was the last Christmas gift I gave her. She must have wanted Sarah to give it to you, Ethan, but somehow she found me instead," Lily said simply, "and I found Ethan." A social worker entered the room, interrupting the moment. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm Jessica from Child Protective Services. We need to discuss Lily's situation." Richard stood up, suddenly feeling more decisive than he had in months. "Of course, but first, I need to tell you about a rather extraordinary connection between our families." As Richard explained the situation to the bewildered social worker, he felt something shifting within him, a weight lifting, a purpose forming. The ice that had encased his heart since Elizabeth's death was beginning to thaw, melted by the unexpected warmth of a homeless child with an angel necklace. "So you see," he concluded, "I believe my wife would want me to help Lily. I'd like to apply for emergency foster care while we sort out a more permanent arrangement." Jessica looked skeptical. "Mr. Mitchell, while I appreciate the connection you feel, there are procedures." "Dad," Ethan interrupted, wheeling closer, "can Lily come live with us, please?" Richard looked at his son's face, truly looked at him, for the first time in months. There was life there again, hope. Then he turned to Lily, this brave little girl who had lost everything, yet still found the strength to help others. "That's exactly what I'm trying to arrange, Ethan," he said. "If Lily wants to, of course." Lily's pale face brightened. "Really? I could stay with you and Ethan?" Then her expression clouded. "But what about my mum's things? Our special box is still at our place." "We'll get your things, Lily," Richard promised. "All of them. And you can tell us all about your mom. I'd like to know more about the woman who was with Elizabeth at the end." As the social worker began explaining the complex process ahead, Richard felt a strange sense of peace washing over him. The angel necklace had found its way to his son after all, though not in the way Elizabeth might have imagined, and in doing so, it had brought them Lily, a child who, in her own way, was helping to heal his broken family. The secret that had left Richard paralyzed that morning, the shocking revelation of the necklace's journey, was transforming into something else entirely, a second chance. 3 days later, Richard stood in the doorway of what had once been a guest bedroom in the east wing of the mansion. Workers moved efficiently around him, transforming the space according to his detailed instructions. Pale lavender walls, custom bookshelves, a window seat overlooking the gardens. Next to him, Ethan watched from his wheelchair, more animated than Richard had seen him in over a year. "Do you think she'll like it, Dad?" Ethan asked, his eyes following a worker hanging delicate fairy lights around the perimeter of the ceiling. "I hope so," Richard replied, still amazed at how quickly his priorities had shifted. 3 days ago, he had been obsessing over the Westbrook merger. Now, he was personally overseeing the creation of a bedroom for a 9-year-old girl he barely knew. Dr. B.C. Patel had agreed to release Lily tomorrow, provided her recovery continued, and the emergency foster care authorization came through. Richard had pulled every string, called in every favor, and even had his company's legal team working around the clock to navigate the bureaucratic maze of child welfare services. "Mr. Mitchell?" It was Martha, his longtime housekeeper, appearing at his side with a concerned expression. "There's a call for you from the hospital." Richard's heart dropped. "Is it Lily? Has something happened?" "No, sir, she's fine, but they found something in her backpack, a journal belonging to her mother. They think you should see it." An hour later, Richard sat alone in his study, a worn leather journal open on his desk. The handwriting was neat, precise, the handwriting of a nurse accustomed to keeping detailed records. Sarah Collins had documented the last 6 months of her life as cancer slowly took her strength, but never her determination to prepare her daughter for a world without her. Richard's eyes blurred with tears as he read entry after entry. "Taught Lily how to make oatmeal today. She's too young for such responsibilities, but what choice do I have? No family, savings almost gone, and these treatments aren't working. My brave girl pretends not to be scared, but I see it in her eyes." Showed Lily the physical therapy exercises again. She memorizes everything so quickly. "Just in case someone needs help someday," she said. "My little healer. The angel necklace brings her comfort." I've told her about Elizabeth Mitchell so many times that she feels like she knew her. I should have found her son years ago, given him the necklace as I promised. Another failure to add to my list. The final entry, dated just 2 weeks before Lily had appeared in his garden, broke something open inside Richard's chest. I won't see another spring. The hospice nurse thinks I have weeks, not months. Lily refuses to discuss foster care. She says she'll be fine, that the angel will protect her. We've been evicted, living in the car. I've failed her completely. Elizabeth, if you're watching over your angel necklace as you said you would, please help my Lily find her way when I'm gone. Richard closed the journal, his hands shaking. Sarah Collins had died alone, her brilliant mind and compassionate heart extinguished too soon, leaving behind a daughter who had somehow found the strength to survive on her own. And against all odds, that daughter had found her way to the very family Sarah had once promised to connect with. "Dad!" Ethan's voice came from the doorway. He had wheeled himself to the study, something he rarely did before Lily entered their lives. "Is everything okay?" Richard looked up, seeing his son with new eyes. "No, buddy, everything's not okay, but I think it might be someday." He wheeled his son into the study, something he should have done months ago instead of hiding in his work. "Ethan, there's something I need to tell you about Lily's mom." As Richard explained about Sarah's illness, her struggles, and her connection to Elizabeth, he watched understanding dawn in his son's eyes. "So Lily's been all alone, just like I felt," Ethan said quietly, "except she didn't even have a dad or a house." Richard felt shame wash over him. While he had abandoned his son emotionally, retreating into work and grief, this little girl had been fighting for survival on the streets, armed with nothing but her mother's teachings and an angel necklace. "Dad?" Ethan's voice pulled him back. "Can we go see Lily? I want to tell her about Mom. I think she'd like to know more about the lady who gave her mom the necklace." Richard checked his watch. Visiting hours would be over soon. "Let's go right now," he said, already standing. He had spent too long putting off the important things in life. At the hospital, they found Lily sitting up in bed, her color much improved. The angel necklace caught the light as she turned to greet them with a smile that transformed her thin face. "Ethan, Mr. Mitchell, I was hoping you'd come today." "We brought you something," Ethan said, producing a framed photograph from his backpack. It showed Elizabeth radiant in a summer dress, laughing at the camera. "This is my mom, the one who gave your mom the angel necklace." Lily took the frame reverently, her eyes wide. "She's beautiful, just like my mom said." She looked up at Richard. "My mom said she had kind eyes." "She does." Richard's throat tightened. "Your mom was right about a lot of things, Lily. She was a very special person." "I know," Lily said simply. "She taught me everything, even how to be brave when I'm scared." Her small fingers traced the edge of the photo frame. "I miss her so much." "I miss my mom too," Ethan said, "but it helps to talk about her. Dad never wants to talk about her, but I think it helps." Richard felt his son's words like a physical blow. How had he not seen how much Ethan needed to remember, to celebrate Elizabeth rather than bury her memory in silence? "You're right, Ethan," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "And from now on, we're going to talk about your mom whenever you want. We're going to remember her together." He turned to Lily. "And if you want, you can tell us all about your mom too. I'd like to know more about Sarah." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "Really? Sometimes I'm afraid I'll forget things about her if I don't keep saying them out loud." "You won't forget," Richard promised. "And now you have us to help you remember." As Ethan began telling Lily stories about Elizabeth, Richard watched the two children, both scarred by loss, yet somehow finding comfort in each other. The broken pieces of two families slowly being gathered together, not to recreate what was lost, but to form something new and unexpected. Richard Mitchell, who had built his reputation on seeing patterns in chaos and opportunity in disaster, now saw the most important pattern of all: how love, even after death, could continue to shape the living in ways no one could predict. The guardian angel necklace glinted in the hospital lights as Lily laughed at something Ethan said, the sound brightening the sterile room like sunshine. For the first time since the accident, Richard allowed himself to believe that perhaps Elizabeth was indeed watching over them all. 2 weeks later, The Mitchell mansion was transformed. Rooms that had been silent for months now echoed with the sounds of children's voices, therapy equipment, and life returning. Richard stood in the doorway of the newly established physical therapy room, converted from what had once been Elizabeth's art studio. The space was now filled with exercise mats, parallel bars, and various equipment personally selected by the top pediatric physical therapist in Connecticut, Dr. Leanne Kwan, who had agreed to come to the house 3 times a week to work with Ethan. At the center of the room, Ethan was gripping the parallel bars, sweat beading on his forehead as he attempted to support his weight on his legs. Lily stood nearby, encouraging him with the same gentle determination Richard had witnessed that first day in the garden. "Remember what my mom taught me, Ethan. Small steps. Your brain needs to remember how to talk to your legs again," Dr. Kwan observed, taking notes. "Lily has quite the intuitive understanding of rehabilitation principles," she remarked to Richard. "Some of these exercises are exactly what I would have recommended." Richard nodded, watching as his son struggled to shift his weight from one leg to the other. Her mother was a nurse, specialized in rehabilitation. She taught Lily everything she knew. What Richard didn't say was how Lily's presence had accelerated Ethan's progress exponentially. The boy, who had refused therapy for months, was now dedicated to his exercises, pushing himself beyond what any adult could have motivated him to do. "I think that's enough for today, Ethan," Dr. Kwan said, checking her watch. "You've made excellent progress." Ethan shook his head stubbornly, beads of sweat dripping down his face. "5 more minutes. I almost got it this time." "The body needs rest to heal, buddy," Richard said, stepping into the room. "You can try again tomorrow." Reluctantly, Ethan allowed Lily and Dr. Kwan to help him back into his wheelchair. Despite his exhaustion, there was a spark in his eyes that had been missing for so long. Later that evening, after Dr. Kwan had left and the children had dinner, Richard found himself in Lily's new bedroom, helping her organize the few possessions they had retrieved from the abandoned car where she had been living after her mother's death. "This was my mom's favorite book," Lily said, holding up a worn copy of The Secret Garden. "She used to read it to me when I was little." Richard took the book, noting the careful way Sarah Collins had repaired the spine with tape and glue. "Would you like me to read some of it to you tonight?" Lily's face lit up. "Really, like a bedtime story?" The simple question hit Richard like a physical blow. When was the last time he had read Ethan a bedtime story? Before the accident, certainly. Elizabeth had always been the one who handled bedtime routines, making up elaborate stories that had Ethan giggling under the covers. "Yes, exactly like a bedtime story," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "And maybe Ethan would like to listen too." That night, for the first time since the accident, Richard sat between the 2 children's beds, Lily in her new lavender room, and Ethan in his adjacent bedroom with the connecting door open, and read aloud from The Secret Garden. As the story of orphaned Mary discovering healing and hope in an abandoned garden unfolded, Richard couldn't help but notice the parallels to their own situation. "Dad," Ethan asked when Richard paused to turn a page, "can we make a garden for Lily? A real one, not just flowers and stuff, but with vegetables like her mom used to grow?" Richard looked up, surprised. Ethan hadn't called him Dad with such natural ease in months. Usually it was a formal father, or simply silence. "I think that's a wonderful idea," he replied. "What do you think, Lily? Would you like a garden?" Lily nodded eagerly, her fingers absently touching the angel necklace that never left her neck. "Mom and I had a community garden plot before she got too sick. She said growing things reminds us that even after the hardest winter, life comes back." The next day, Richard cancelled 3 business meetings and spent the morning consulting with the estate's landscaper about converting a section of the manicured grounds into a vegetable garden. By afternoon, he found himself doing something he hadn't done in years, getting his hands dirty, literally, as he worked alongside the gardeners to prepare the soil. From his wheelchair positioned at the edge of the emerging garden, Ethan called out suggestions based on a gardening book they had found in the library. Lily moved between helping Richard and sitting with Ethan, her knowledge of plants surprising them both. "My mom said tomatoes and basil should always be planted together," she explained, carefully marking spots in the freshly turned earth. "They help each other grow better." "Like people," Ethan observed thoughtfully. "Some people help you grow better too." Richard paused, garden trowel in hand, struck by his son's insight. Elizabeth would have loved this moment. Her analytical husband and literal-minded son discovering metaphors in a garden, guided by a little girl who had every reason to be bitter about life, but somehow maintained her mother's optimistic wisdom. That night, muscles aching from unaccustomed physical labor, Richard sat in his study, reviewing the paperwork his lawyers had prepared regarding Lily's situation. The emergency foster placement had been approved, but more permanent arrangements would require additional steps. Child Services had located a distant cousin of Sarah Collins in Ohio, though the woman had never met Lily and had expressed only lukewarm interest in taking custody. Richard stared at the documents, a decision crystallizing in his mind. He had already instructed his legal team to explore adoption options, though he hadn't yet discussed this with Lily. It felt too soon, too presumptuous perhaps. But watching her with Ethan, seeing how they helped each other heal, Richard couldn't imagine separating them now. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Martha stood at the door, an unusual expression on her normally composed face. "Sir, I thought you should come see this." She led him to the physical therapy room, gesturing for him to be quiet as they approached. Through the partially open door, Richard could see Ethan and Lily inside. His son was out of his wheelchair, standing between the parallel bars, while Lily adjusted his posture. "Mom said you have to engage your core muscles," Lily was saying, demonstrating by standing straight with her small shoulders back. "Like you're a tree with strong roots." "I feel stronger today," Ethan said, his voice containing something Richard hadn't heard in a long time: pride. "Try taking a step," Lily encouraged. "Just a small one. Remember what Dr. Kwan said about shifting your weight first." Richard held his breath as Ethan concentrated intensely, his face flushed with effort. Then, slowly, agonizingly, his right foot moved forward an inch, then another. A small step, but a step nonetheless, one that none of his previous therapists had been able to coax from him. "You did it," Lily exclaimed, clapping her hands. "That's exactly how it starts. Mom said the first step is always the hardest." Richard felt Martha's hand on his arm, steadying him as the implications of what they were witnessing sank in. The doctors had been cautiously optimistic about Ethan's prospects for walking again, but all had emphasized that progress would be slow, measured in months and years rather than days and weeks. Yet here was his son, taking his first independent step only 2 weeks after Lily had entered their lives. "Should we let them know we saw?" Martha whispered, tears in her eyes. Richard shook his head, backing away quietly. "Not yet. This is their moment." That night, as he sat alone in his bedroom, still instinctively on his side of the king-sized bed, leaving Elizabeth's side untouched, Richard found himself doing something he hadn't done since the funeral. He talked to his wife. "You would love her, Liz," he whispered into the darkness. "She has your spirit somehow, and she's bringing our boy back to us step by step." His fingers traced the empty pillow beside him. "I think I understand now why you gave your necklace to Sarah. You always could see connections that the rest of us missed." For the first time in over a year, Richard Mitchell fell asleep without the weight of guilt and grief crushing his chest. In the hallway outside his room, the angel necklace glinted in the moonlight as Lily crept back to her bedroom, having stood silent witness to his whispered conversation. Small steps, she thought to herself. Mom was right, healing always begins with small steps. As autumn deepened toward winter, the Mitchell household settled into a new routine. Mornings began with Ethan's therapy sessions, followed by homeschooling for both children with a tutor Richard had hired. Afternoons were often spent in the garden, where late-season vegetables were thriving under Lily's careful attention, or in the library where Richard had begun working remotely several days a week to be more present in the children's lives. On a particularly crisp November morning, Richard sat in his home office reviewing quarterly reports when Martha appeared at the door, her normally composed expression troubled. "Mr. Mitchell, there's a Ms. Diane Prescott here from Child Protective Services. She says she needs to speak with you urgently." Richard felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn weather. He had been expecting a routine follow-up visit, but something in Martha's voice suggested this was different. In the formal living room, a severe-looking woman in a charcoal suit stood examining the family photographs Richard had recently updated to include Lily. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm Diane Prescott, Regional Supervisor for CPS," she said, her handshake firm and impersonal. "I've taken over Lily Collins' case personally." "Is there a problem?" Richard asked, gesturing for her to sit. "Our last report from Jessica was quite positive." Ms. Prescott remained standing. "That's precisely the issue, Mr. Mitchell. Jessica has been reassigned. There are concerns about how this case has been handled." Richard felt his business instincts kick in, the ability to sense a threat before it fully materialized. "What kind of concerns?" "To be blunt, there are questions about the extraordinary speed with which you've been granted temporary custody, the lack of thorough background investigation, and the apparent dismissal of Lily's maternal cousin in Ohio as a placement option." Richard maintained his composure with effort. "I assure you, Ms. Prescott, everything has been done legally and with Lily's best interests at heart. My legal team has—" "Yes, your legal team," she interrupted. "4 high-powered attorneys from your company descending on our office, expediting paperwork, bypassing standard protocols. It creates the appearance of undue influence." The implication was clear. Richard Mitchell had used his wealth and connections to manipulate the system. "Ms. Prescott," he said carefully, "I understand your concerns, but I would invite you to observe Lily here, to see how well she's adjusted, how her health has improved, and most importantly, the remarkable bond she's formed with my son. That's why I'm here, Mr. Mitchell. I'll need to interview Lily privately and reassess this placement. I'll also need to speak with your son and the household staff." Richard nodded stiffly. "Of course, whatever you need." For the next 3 hours, Richard paced his office while Ms. Prescott conducted her interviews. Through the window, he could see Lily showing the social worker the garden, pointing out the vegetables she had planted. Later, he glimpsed Ethan demonstrating his progress on the parallel bars, Lily standing nearby with unmistakable pride. Finally, Ms. Prescott returned to his office, her professional demeanor slightly softened. "I must admit, Mr. Mitchell, Lily appears to be thriving here, and the improvement in your son's condition is remarkable." Richard felt a tentative relief. "Then there's no issue with her continuing to stay with us." "I didn't say that." Ms. Prescott consulted her notes. "There are still procedural concerns, and Lily's cousin in Ohio has now expressed more definite interest in custody." More definite interest. Richard couldn't keep the edge from his voice. "The woman has never even met Lily." "Nevertheless, blood relations are given priority in our system, Mr. Mitchell. And there's another matter." Her expression became grave. "We've received an anonymous report suggesting that you're using Lily as a therapeutic tool for your son, rather than truly caring for her welfare." Richard felt as though he'd been struck. "That's absurd. Who would make such a claim?" "Anonymous reports remain anonymous, Mr. Mitchell, but I am obligated to investigate all concerns." She closed her folder with finality. Now Lily will remain in your temporary custody, but I'll be scheduling regular unannounced visits, and we'll be proceeding with a home study of the cousin in Ohio." After showing Miss Prescott out, Richard stood in the foyer, a cold dread settling in his stomach. For the first time since Lily had entered their lives, he faced the real possibility of losing her, not just for his sake or Ethan's, but for Lily herself, who had already lost too much. He found the children in the physical therapy room, Ethan practicing standing with his walker while Lily arranged cushions around him in case he fell. "Was that lady going to take me away?" Lily asked bluntly, her perceptiveness startling Richard as it often did. Richard hesitated, then decided on honesty. "She's trying to decide what's best for you, Lily. There's a cousin of your mum's who might want you to live with her in Ohio." Lily's face paled. "But I don't know anyone in Ohio. And Ethan needs me here." Her small hand reached for the angel necklace, a gesture Richard had come to recognize as her seeking comfort. "I need you here too," Ethan said fiercely, his hands gripping the walker until his knuckles whitened. "Dad, you can't let them take her." Richard knelt between the two children, putting a hand on each of their shoulders. "I'm going to do everything I can to keep us together. I promise." Later that night, after the children were asleep, Richard sat in his study making phone calls to his lawyers, to colleagues with connections in family services, to anyone who might help ensure Lily remained with them. The irony wasn't lost on him. 6 months ago, he would have been making similar calls about a corporate takeover, not fighting to keep his unlikely family together. A soft knock at the door interrupted his strategizing. Martha entered, carrying a tray with coffee and a plate of cookies. "I thought you might need something to keep you going, sir," she said, placing the tray on his desk. Then, uncharacteristically, she lingered. "Mr. Mitchell, there's something you should know." Richard looked up, noting the unusual hesitation in his normally straightforward housekeeper. "After that social worker left, I received a strange phone call. A woman asking about Lily and her mother. She wouldn't identify herself, but she knew details about Sarah Collins' illness, about the angel necklace." Richard felt his pulse quicken. "What did she want?" "She asked if Lily was happy here. I told her the truth, that the child is flourishing. She seemed relieved. Then she asked if you were planning to adopt Lily permanently. What did you tell her?" "I said I believed that was your intention, though you hadn't discussed it formally." Martha paused. She hung up after that. "But sir, I can't help wondering if she might be connected to this anonymous report the social worker mentioned." Richard considered this, pieces falling into place. "Or perhaps she made the call to find out if the report had any effect. You think someone is trying to help Lily stay here? Or making sure she's truly in a good place?" Richard's mind worked through the possibilities. "Martha, did anything about the woman's voice seem familiar?" Martha hesitated. "It reminded me somewhat of Sarah Collins from the few times I met her at the hospital when she was caring for Mrs. Mitchell. There was something in the cadence, though the caller seemed to be disguising her voice." Richard sat back, processing this information. "Thank you, Martha. If she calls again, try to get more information, and please don't mention this to the children yet, especially Lily." After Martha left, Richard stared at the family photograph on his desk, a recent one showing him with Ethan and Lily in the garden they had created together. Who would want to separate them now? And who might be watching from the shadows, ensuring Lily's welfare? The next morning, Richard cancelled all his meetings and drove to Greenwich Hospital. If Sarah Collins had worked there, perhaps someone remembered her and might know more about this mysterious cousin in Ohio who had suddenly expressed interest in Lily. At the nurse's station in the oncology ward, Richard introduced himself to the charge nurse, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Sarah Collins, of course I remember her," the nurse, who had introduced herself as Gloria, said. "One of the best nurses I ever worked with. We were all devastated when she got sick herself." "Did she ever mention family, specifically a cousin in Ohio?" Gloria's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're the one who took in her daughter, aren't you? Little Lily with the angel necklace." Richard nodded, surprised at how word had traveled. "Sarah didn't have family, Mr. Mitchell. That was part of what made her situation so heartbreaking. She was raised in foster care herself, aged out of the system. No relatives that she ever mentioned, and believe me, we were looking when she got sick." Richard felt a chill. "No cousins in Ohio." Gloria shook her head decisively. No one. Sarah used to joke that her hospital staff was the only family she'd ever had. She paused, studying Richard's face. Why do you ask? Richard explained about Ms. Prescott's visit and the supposed cousin who had expressed interest in Lily. Gloria's expression hardened. That doesn't sound right at all. Sarah was terrified about Lily ending up in the system like she had. That's why she refused hospice care in the end. She was trying to stay alive as long as possible to keep Lily out of foster care. Then who would claim to be her cousin? And who would make an anonymous report questioning Lily's placement with us? Gloria hesitated, then lowered her voice. There might be someone who could help you understand. Dr. Miranda Chen. She was Sarah's oncologist, but they were also friends. She took Sarah's death particularly hard. 20 minutes later, Richard sat in Dr. Chen's office, explaining the situation. The oncologist listened carefully, her expression grave. Mr. Mitchell, what I'm about to tell you isn't strictly ethical from a medical perspective, but given the circumstances and what's at stake for Lily. She took a deep breath. Sarah was concerned about what would happen to Lily after she was gone. She made me promise to keep an eye on her daughter if anything happened. I've been monitoring the situation. Understanding dawned on Richard. The anonymous calls to check on Lily. That was you. Dr. Chen nodded. When I heard through hospital channels that Lily had somehow ended up in your home, the home of Elizabeth Mitchell's family, whose necklace Sarah treasured, it seemed like fate. I've been making discreet inquiries to ensure she's being well cared for. But the cousin in Ohio? The report to CPS? Dr. Chen's face darkened. That wasn't me. Sarah had no family. That much I know for certain. Someone is lying, Mr. Mitchell, and I'm as concerned as you are about why. Richard left the hospital with more questions than answers, but also with a new ally. Dr. Chen had promised to provide a formal statement about Sarah's lack of extended family and her express wishes for Lily's care. It might not be enough to counter the mysterious claims from Ohio, but it was a start. As he drove home, Richard's phone rang. It was his assistant at Mitchell Financial Group. Sir, there's something unusual you should know about. Someone has been making inquiries about your personal finances, specifically about any changes to your will in the past month. Richard's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Who? We don't know, sir. The inquiries came through a law firm in Cleveland, Ohio. The pieces were starting to come together. Someone in Ohio was indeed interested in Lily, or more specifically, in the financial arrangements surrounding her. Richard had recently updated his will to include provisions for Lily, ensuring she would be cared for equally with Ethan should anything happen to him. He hadn't made the changes public, but such matters rarely remained completely private in financial circles. By the time Richard returned home, a plan was forming in his mind. If someone was trying to manipulate the situation for financial gain, he needed to uncover who and why. He found Ethan and Lily in the garden, harvesting the last of the season's vegetables before the first frost. The sight of them working together, Ethan directing operations from his walker, which he now used instead of his wheelchair for short periods, and Lily carefully placing their harvest in baskets, strengthened his resolve. "Dad!" Ethan called, his face flushed with healthy exertion. "Look how many carrots we grew!" Richard joined them, kneeling in the soil beside Lily. "Impressive harvest, farmers. Listen, I need to ask you something important, Lily. Did your mom ever mention any relatives, maybe someone she'd lost touch with?" Lily shook her head, her expression serious. "No, Mom said it was just us. She used to tell me we were like a special two-person family, and that's why we had to take extra good care of each other." Her small fingers reached for the angel necklace. "She said the only other family we had were angels watching over us." Richard nodded, unsurprised but troubled. "Thank you for telling me, Lily. You two keep up the good work. I need to make some calls." That evening, after the children were asleep, Richard convened an unusual meeting in his study. Martha sat primly on one chair, while Dr. Miranda Chen, who had agreed to come after her shift, occupied another. Richard's lead attorney, David Hargrove, completed the group. "Someone is trying to gain control of Lily for financial reasons," Richard explained bluntly. They've invented a fictional relative and filed an anonymous complaint with CPS, likely to cast doubt on the legitimacy of her placement here. But why? Martha asked. The child had nothing when she came here. No, but I've recently updated my will to include provisions for her, Richard replied. Someone who's aware of that might see an opportunity to control those assets as Lily's guardian. Dr. Chen leaned forward. Who would even know about Sarah's daughter or her connection to your family? Richard had been pondering this very question. Someone who knew about the angel necklace and its significance. Someone who might have learned about it from Sarah herself. A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. We need to identify this person in Ohio and expose their scheme before Ms. Prescott proceeds with any custody considerations, David Hargrove said. I can have a private investigator in Cleveland by morning. Do it, Richard instructed, and I want to expedite the formal adoption petition. If someone is trying to exploit Lily for financial gain, we need to establish legal protections as quickly as possible. As the meeting continued, outlining strategies and contingencies, Richard felt a presence and looked toward the partially open door. There, clutching her stuffed rabbit, stood Lily in her pajamas, her blue eyes wide with fear. Are they going to take me away? She asked, her voice small. Richard crossed the room in 3 strides, kneeling before her. No, sweetheart. We're doing everything to make sure that doesn't happen. I heard you talking. Someone's telling lies about me? Richard hesitated, then nodded. Adults often underestimated children's capacity to understand difficult truths. Yes, Lily. Someone is trying to take advantage of the situation, but we're going to stop them. Lily's expression turned surprisingly determined for such a young child. Mom always said the truth is the strongest thing there is, even stronger than being sick or being scared. Richard felt a surge of admiration for this resilient child and the remarkable woman who had raised her. Your mom was very wise, Lily, and she was right. Dr. Chen approached them, smiling gently at Lily. Hello, Lily. I'm Dr. Chen. I was your mom's doctor and her friend. Lily studied her with solemn eyes. She told me about you. She said you fought really hard to make her better. I did, Dr. Chen said, her voice thick with emotion. Your mom was very special to me, and I made her a promise that I would help look out for you. Are you the angel Mom said would watch over me? Lily asked, fingering her necklace. Dr. Chen glanced at Richard, then back to Lily. I'm not an angel, just a friend, but I'm going to help your new family make sure you're safe. As Richard led Lily back to bed, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The shadow looming over their newfound happiness had a source, and he would find it. For Lily, for Ethan, and for the 2 remarkable women, Elizabeth and Sarah, whose lives and deaths had somehow brought them all together. The first snow of the season fell gently outside the windows of Richard's study as he reviewed the private investigator's report. 3 days of intensive investigation in Cleveland had yielded results that were both troubling and illuminating. The supposed cousin was actually a paralegal named Veronica Simmons, who worked for a small law firm specializing in trust and estate matters. Further digging had revealed that Simmons had accessed Sarah Collins' medical records approximately 1 month after her death, a clear violation of privacy laws. Most damning of all, the investigator had discovered a connection between Simmons and a former colleague of Richard's, Lawrence Grant, who had left Mitchell Financial Group under contentious circumstances 2 years earlier. Richard set down the report, pieces falling into place. Grant had access to information about Richard's personal financial matters during his time at the company. He would have known about the substantial trust funds established for Ethan and might well have learned about the recent amendments, including Lily. Using Simmons to fabricate a family connection to the orphaned girl would have been a clever, if despicable, way to attempt to gain control of those assets. Mr. Mitchell. Martha appeared at the door. Ms. Prescott from CPS is here again. She says it's urgent. Richard steeled himself, gathering the investigator's report and the affidavits they had collected from hospital staff regarding Sarah Collins' lack of family. Whatever Grant's scheme entailed, it ended today. In the living room, Diane Prescott stood with a markedly different demeanor than during her previous visit. Her expression was troubled, almost apologetic. "Mr. Mitchell, I've received some concerning information regarding Lily's case that I need to discuss with you immediately." Richard gestured for her to sit. "I believe I know what this is about, Ms. Prescott, but please, go ahead." "We've discovered irregularities with the documentation submitted by Lily's purported relative in Ohio." She placed a folder on the coffee table between them. "The birth certificate supposedly linking her to Sarah Collins appears to be falsified. We're investigating this as a potential case of attempted custody fraud." Richard nodded, unsurprised. "I've been conducting my own investigation." He handed her the private investigator's report. "I believe this woman, Veronica Simmons, is working with someone who has a financial interest in gaining control of Lily, specifically the provisions I've made for her in my will." Ms. Prescott's eyes widened as she skimmed the report. "This is extremely troubling, Mr. Mitchell. Rest assured, we take fraud very seriously. This changes the situation entirely." "What does this mean for Lily's placement?" "With this evidence, and without any legitimate family members coming forward, the path to permanent adoption would be considerably smoother." She looked up from the documents. "Assuming that's still your intention." "It is," Richard said firmly. "I'd like to proceed as quickly as possible. There is still the matter of the anonymous complaint regarding your motives for taking in Lily." Richard nodded. "I believe that was likely part of the same scheme to cast doubt on the placement. But I welcome any investigation into Lily's well-being here. The facts speak for themselves." As if on cue, sounds of laughter drifted in from the adjacent room. Ms. Prescott glanced toward the source of the noise. "May I?" she asked, rising. Richard led her to the doorway of the family room, where a heartwarming scene was unfolding. Ethan stood between his walker, decorating a small Christmas tree with Lily, who was carefully handing him ornaments from a box. The physical therapist observed from nearby, beaming with professional pride at Ethan's improved balance and strength. "Last Christmas, Ethan refused to participate in any holiday activities," Richard said quietly. "He spent most of December in his room. This year, he's helping plan a Christmas pageant with his tutor." Ms. Prescott watched as Lily stood on tiptoe to place a star-shaped ornament in Ethan's hand, then steadied his arm as he reached to hang it on the tree. "They really do help each other, don't they?" she observed. "In more ways than I could have imagined," Richard replied. "Lily gave Ethan a reason to fight for his recovery, and Ethan has given Lily security and family when she needed it most." Ms. Prescott turned to Richard with a professional but distinctly warmer expression. "I'll expedite the paperwork for the adoption process, Mr. Mitchell, and I'll personally ensure that the fraud attempt is thoroughly investigated." After she left, Richard stood watching the children continue their decorating, his heart full. The shadow that had threatened their happiness was lifting. Now it was time to move forward, to make official what they already knew in their hearts. They were a family. That evening after dinner, Richard gathered Ethan and Lily in the living room. The Christmas tree they had decorated cast a warm glow over the space, and outside, snow continued to fall gently, transforming the grounds into a winter wonderland. "I have something important I want to talk to you both about," Richard began, sitting so he was at eye level with the children. Ethan, using his walker, moved closer to Lily, as if instinctively protecting her. Richard noticed with pride how his son had grown not just physically stronger in recent months, but emotionally braver as well. "Is it about the people who were trying to take Lily away?" Ethan asked directly. Richard nodded, impressed by his son's perception. "Partly, yes. That situation is being resolved. The person claiming to be Lily's relative wasn't telling the truth, and now the authorities know that." Relief washed over Lily's face, her small hand automatically reaching for the angel necklace. "So, I can stay? That's what I want to talk about." Richard said gently. "Lily, these past few months with you have brought something back to this house that I thought was gone forever. You've helped Ethan in ways no doctor or therapist could, and you've helped me remember what's truly important in life." He took a deep breath, suddenly nervous, in a way that billion-dollar business deals never made him feel. "If you would like to, Lily, I want to adopt you legally. That would mean you would be my daughter, and Ethan's sister permanently. This would be your home forever, but it's a big decision, and I want you to have time to think about it if you need to." Ethan's face broke into a wide grin, but Lily's expression remained serious, her blue eyes thoughtful beyond her years. "Would my last name change?" she asked quietly. Richard nodded. "It could, yes. You would be Lily Mitchell. But if you wanted to keep Collins as well, to honor your mum, you could be Lily Collins Mitchell." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "Mum would like that, I think. She always said names are important because they tell people who you belong to." "She was right," Richard said, his own voice becoming husky with emotion. "Family is about belonging to each other." "But," Lily continued, her small face solemn, "if I'm your daughter, does that mean I have to stop talking about my mom? Like how Ethan didn't talk about his mom for a long time?" The question hit Richard like a physical blow, so perceptive, so honest. He glanced at Ethan, who looked down, understanding the reference all too well. "No, Lily," Richard said firmly. "In fact, it means exactly the opposite. In this family, our family, we're going to talk about both of your mothers. Elizabeth and Sarah, we're going to remember them, honor them, and keep their memories alive, because without them, we wouldn't be here together now." Ethan looked up, tears shining in his eyes. "Dad's right, Lily. I should have been talking about Mom all along. It helps, like you showed me." Lily nodded slowly, processing everything. Then, with the direct simplicity of a child, she asked, "Can I call you Dad? Or is that only for Ethan?" Richard felt his heart expand in his chest. "I would be honored if you called me Dad, Lily. Very honored indeed." Without warning, Lily launched herself into his arms. Over her shoulder, Richard met Ethan's gaze, extending an arm to include him in the embrace. For a long moment, the three of them held each other, a family forged not from blood, but from love, loss, and the mysterious workings of fate symbolized by a silver angel necklace. Later that night, after both children were asleep, Richard sat in his study with a glass of scotch, contemplating how dramatically his life had changed in just a few months. The corporate titan who had buried himself in work to avoid his grief had been transformed by a child's courage and another child's resilience. His phone buzzed with a text from David Hargrove. "Police have questioned Simmons. She's cooperating. Grant appears to be the mastermind. Charges likely. Justice would be served." But Richard found he had little interest in vengeance. Lawrence Grant's scheme had backfired completely, serving only to accelerate the legal process that would make Lily officially a Mitchell. Richard pulled out the small velvet box from his desk drawer, a Christmas gift for Lily that he had commissioned weeks ago. Inside was a silver bracelet with 2 charms, an angel to match her necklace, and a small heart engraved with the initials of all 4 of them: RM, EM, EC, and LC. 4 lives intertwined by tragedy and blessing, loss and discovery. The sound of soft footsteps in the hallway caught his attention. Richard closed the box and opened his study door to find Ethan standing there in his pajamas, leaning on his walker. "Dad, I can't sleep," he admitted. "Everything okay, buddy?" Richard asked, concerned. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, just thinking too much. Can I sit with you for a while?" "Of course." Richard helped him to the comfortable chair by the fireplace, marveling at how much stronger his son had become. "What's on your mind?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "I was thinking about Mom, about how she gave away her necklace to Lily's mom in the hospital." Richard nodded, settling into the chair opposite his son. "What about it?" "It's like..." Ethan struggled to articulate his complex thoughts. "It's like she knew somehow that we would need Lily, and Lily would need us. like she was still taking care of us even after she was gone. Richard felt a lump form in his throat. That's exactly what your mother would do, Ethan. She always could see connections that the rest of us missed. I miss her, Ethan said simply, but I'm not angry anymore, and I'm not scared to talk about her now. That's all because of Lily, Richard acknowledged. She taught us both how to remember without being crushed by the pain of it. No, Ethan said with surprising firmness. It's because of you too, Dad. You let Lily help us. The old you would have just sent her away and kept working all the time. The truth in his son's words was both painful and healing. Richard had indeed changed, forced to open his heart by circumstances he could never have predicted. You're right, Ethan. I needed to change. I'm sorry it took me so long to be the father you deserved, Ethan shrugged with the forgiving nature of children. You're doing it now. That's what matters. As they sat together in comfortable silence watching the fire, Richard reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this moment of peace. The chain of events that had begun with Elizabeth giving her cherished necklace to a compassionate nurse had culminated in healing not just for Ethan's body, but for all their wounded hearts. Somewhere, he liked to think, Elizabeth and Sarah were watching over them, perhaps together, two mothers whose love continued to shape the living in ways no one could have foreseen. The angel necklace had found its way home, after all. 1 year later, snow fell gently outside the windows of Greenwich Hospital's rehabilitation center as Ethan Mitchell concentrated intensely, taking one careful step after another between the parallel bars. At 10 years old, his face showed the determination that had become his trademark over the past year, a quiet, unwavering resolve that impressed everyone from his doctors to his school teachers. That's it, Ethan. 5 more steps, and you've beaten your record, encouraged Dr. Leanne Kwan, stopwatch in hand. On the bench nearby, Richard and Lily watched with matching expressions of pride and anxiety. Lily, now 10 years old and officially Lily Collins Mitchell for almost a year, clutched her angel necklace, a gesture that had become less frequent but still emerged in moments of heightened emotion. He's going to do it, she whispered to Richard. I can tell. Richard squeezed her shoulder gently. I think you're right. Ethan's progress over the past year had astonished his medical team. While he still used a walker for longer distances and would likely always have some mobility limitations, his improvement had far exceeded the cautious prognoses given after the accident. Dr. Kwan had recently confided to Richard that she considered Ethan's case one of the most remarkable recoveries she'd witnessed in 20 years of practice. With a final effort, Ethan reached the end of the parallel bars, a triumphant smile breaking across his face as Dr. Kwan clicked her stopwatch. New personal best, Ethan, and just in time for your big performance. Lily jumped up, running to give her brother a high five as he transferred to his walker. I knew you could do it. Are you nervous about tomorrow? Ethan shook his head, though his expression betrayed a hint of anxiety. Not really. We've practiced a lot. The big performance was the Christmas pageant at their new school, the private academy both children had started attending in September. After months of homeschooling, Richard had enrolled them when Ethan's physical progress made regular school feasible, though he still required some accommodations. Tomorrow's pageant featured Ethan playing piano, a skill he had thrown himself into with the same determination he showed in physical therapy, while Lily sang a solo. It would be Ethan's first public performance since the accident, a milestone that represented far more than musical achievement. As they drove home through the snowy landscape, the mansion came into view, transformed from the austere, silent monument to grief it had once been. Colorful Christmas lights outlined the roof and windows, and wreaths adorned every door. Lily's influence had brought seasonal decorations back to a home that had been devoid of celebration for too long. Inside, Martha greeted them with hot chocolate and news that the last of the party preparations were complete. Tomorrow evening, after the school pageant, the Mitchell home would host its first Christmas gathering since before the accident. A celebration not just of the holiday, but of their journey together. "Dad, can we put the special ornament on the tree now?" Lily asked as they warmed themselves by the fire in the family room. "Since it's Christmas Eve tomorrow?" Richard nodded. "I think that's a perfect idea." From a small wall safe hidden behind a family portrait, Richard retrieved a special ornament commissioned to commemorate their first Christmas as an official family. The delicate silver piece featured 3 figures, an adult and 2 children, standing within the protective wings of an angel. "It's beautiful," Lily breathed, carefully taking it from the velvet box. "Can I be the one to hang it?" "Of course," Richard replied. "But first I think we should say something, don't you, about the people watching over us?" Ethan nodded solemnly, leaning on his walker. "Mum would like that." The 3 of them gathered before the towering Christmas tree, its lights twinkling warmly against the early winter darkness outside. "Elizabeth," Richard began, his voice strong and clear where once it might have broken, "your love continues to guide us. The necklace you gave Sarah brought Lily to us, and with her came healing we didn't know was possible. Mom," Ethan continued, "I'm playing your favorite Christmas song tomorrow. I think you'd be proud of how much I've practiced." Lily stepped forward, clutching the ornament in one hand and her necklace in the other. "And Sarah Collins," she said with the straightforward eloquence of a child, "thank you for teaching me everything I needed to know to find my new family. I'm keeping all my promises, to be brave, to help others, and to remember you every day." With Richard's help, Lily reached up to place the ornament on a prominent branch where the angel's wings caught the light, seeming almost to move. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Richard sat in his study with the doors open, a change from the days when he would isolate himself behind closed doors. From a drawer, he withdrew Sarah Collins' journal, which he had read countless times over the past year. He turned to the final pages, finding comfort in words that had once brought him pain. "My greatest hope is that Lily finds a family who will love her as fiercely as I do, that she'll have siblings to grow up with, traditions to celebrate, and a life filled with the security I never had. The angel necklace was entrusted to me by a dying mother who loved her son with her last breath. Perhaps it truly does hold some protective power. If so, let it guide my daughter to where she belongs when I no longer can." Richard closed the journal gently. Sarah's hope had been realized, though in a way none of them could have foreseen. And Elizabeth's last gift had indeed protected both children, bringing Ethan back from the depths of depression and giving Lily a home when she needed it most. The next evening, the school auditorium buzzed with excitement as parents and families gathered for the Christmas pageant. Richard sat in the front row, camera ready, a strange, nervous pride filling his chest as the curtain prepared to rise. When Ethan wheeled himself to the piano, insisting on using his wheelchair rather than his walker for the stability it offered during his performance, a hush fell over the audience. Many knew the Mitchell family story. It had been impossible to keep private after the legal proceedings against Lawrence Grant had made headlines in financial circles. Ethan's fingers hovered over the keys for a breathless moment. Then, with confidence that made Richard's heart swell, he began to play "Angels We Have Heard on High," Elizabeth's favorite Christmas carol. As the music filled the auditorium, Lily walked to center stage, the angel necklace gleaming against her festive red dress. Her clear voice joined Ethan's music, soaring into the chorus as if reaching toward heaven itself. Richard felt tears spring to his eyes, not the bitter tears of grief he had shed alone in his office for months after Elizabeth's death, but tears of gratitude and wonder. In the faces of these 2 children, he saw the future he had once thought lost forever. Later that night, as friends and family filled the Mitchell mansion with laughter and conversation, Richard stood slightly apart, observing the scene with quiet contentment. The garden room had been transformed into a winter wonderland, with twinkling lights reflecting off the snow visible through the glass walls. In the center of it all, Ethan demonstrated his improving mobility to amazed relatives, while Lily charmed everyone with stories of their gardening adventures. Dr. Miranda Chen approached, champagne glass in hand. Over the past year, she had become a frequent visitor and valued friend. "You've created something remarkable here, Richard," she observed, gesturing toward the children. "Sarah would be so proud of Lily, and Elizabeth would be proud of you all." "It's still hard to believe sometimes," Richard admitted, "how close we came to missing this. If Lily hadn't found her way through that hedge, I don't think it was chance," Dr. Chen said thoughtfully. "Sarah used to talk about signs and connections, how people are brought together for reasons we don't always understand immediately." Richard nodded, his eyes drawn to the angel necklace at Lily's throat as she laughed at something Ethan said. "Elizabeth believed that too. I was always the skeptic in our marriage, looking for logical explanations for everything. And now," Dr. Chen asked with a knowing smile, "now I think there are some things logic can't explain. Some promises that find a way to be kept, even when the people who made them are gone." He raised his glass slightly. "To Elizabeth and Sarah, the angels who brought us together." As midnight approached, the party began to wind down. Richard found the children in the garden room, Ethan teaching Lily a simple melody on the portable keyboard he'd received as a Christmas gift. "Time for bed, you two," he said gently. "It's been a big day." As they made their way upstairs, Ethan using his walker with growing confidence, Lily suddenly stopped, turning to Richard with the serious expression that still sometimes caught him off guard. "Dad, do you think the angel necklace is magic?" she asked. Richard considered his answer carefully. "Not magic in the way stories talk about, but I think it carried something powerful. The love of two mothers who wanted the best for their children, even when they couldn't be here themselves." Lily nodded, satisfied with this answer. "That's what I think too. It helped us find each other when we were all broken." "And now?" Richard asked, curious about her perspective. "Now we're not broken anymore," she said simply. "We're just a family." Later, after tucking both children into bed, Richard paused in the hallway between their rooms. Through Ethan's partially open door, he could see his son sleeping peacefully, the moonlight illuminating his face. In Lily's room, a nightlight cast a soft glow over her collection of plants, evidence of Sarah Collins' legacy living on in her daughter's passions. Richard thought back to that cold autumn day over a year ago, when he had witnessed a scene that left him paralyzed with shock. A homeless girl wearing his wife's necklace, teaching his withdrawn son to stand again. The secret he had discovered then, the connection between Elizabeth, Sarah, and their children, had indeed changed his life forever, just as the dramatic introduction to their story had promised. But the true miracle hadn't been the coincidence that brought them together. It had been the choice they all made thereafter, to heal, to trust, to form a new family from the broken pieces of the old. Outside, snow continued to fall on the grounds of the Mitchell estate, covering the dormant garden where spring would bring new growth. Inside, under the protective wings of memories and love, a family slept peacefully, their guardian angel's promise fulfilled. If you were touched by the story of Richard, Ethan, and Lily, don't miss the next chapters in this emotional journey. Subscribe to our channel now to receive notifications when each new episode is released. Experience the full saga of the Guardian Angel's necklace and discover how small miracles can heal the deepest wounds. Like, share, and comment below with your thoughts on this moving tale of loss, hope, and the unexpected paths that lead broken families to wholeness. Remember, sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as our greatest challenges.